Okay, so I wanted to showcase this app that I vibe coded. It's called Wallpaper Gallery. So essentially, it gets all this information from Pexels, which is this Pexels, and you can search. So say you search house, and you click on search, it shows that out. You can favorite stuff, and if you click over here, you'll see all the favorites of what you have. You can go back home, and if you click on it, it has a popover that you can actually download. It downloads it up here, and then you can view it. And you can see who created it. You can view it on Pexels as well, and you can also favorite here. So if I click here, it should take me to the person who has this image. And if I click here, it should take me directly to the actual image. So this was all vibe coded. I wrote barely any code. So I was using Cursor. And there's this tool called TaskMaster. TaskMaster, essentially what it is, it allows you to organize your code, do some kind of project management, better documentation and flow and team collaboration. Essentially, when you vibe code, Cursor does not have enough context window to remember everything you're doing, especially if you're building something very complex. So what TaskMaster does is it creates a bunch of tasks. As you can see here, let me scroll down here. To the right here, I have my task, which is, I believe, here. Essentially, I created all these tasks. And the way you do that is like you create a PRD. And based on that PRD, it creates you a task. And then it tells you, okay, you're going to do this first and then do that. And it actually has inner relationships as well. In this case, like this is related, is dependent on two. So that way, as you're building the system up, it's remembering it and it's working through it. So you don't have to have a big context window because sometimes Cursor forgets that, but also at the same time, it allows you to have like steps. So almost like I had no bugs or no issues because I was doing it step by step and it always remembered my context window. I guess maybe I can quickly walk through how you set it up. You install it and then you create some kind of an NCP config, which I do have here. I think it's in my config file. So when I did set it up, it actually creates a file for you where you can set up the NCP. I'm trying to figure it out here since it's my first time using this. Yeah, right here. And what it requires is like you have to have a key, which I do have. Unfortunately, I had to create my own OpenAI key in order for me to use it. And that I put in my environment variable here. So that key is going to be used by, they recommend using Perplexity because it does a lot of research and stuff, or does research better, but it does help in essentially when you prompt in and talking to it. So it's a very different AI tool than what you would have from Cursor. So that's why you need to have a separate key for it. So after you've created that, you initialize a project. And when you do, it creates this whole project for you called TaskMaster, which has a script and all of this. Without the source is actually my Next.js, but everything here that you see is created by the TaskMaster with this prompt here. Oh, sorry, with this prompt actually. And then you just go in and start creating essentially a task. And one of the things I do is I start chatting with Cursor. Essentially, I go into the chat window with Cursor, and I think I have a copy here. I'll just go in there and I say, hey, I want to build a wallpaper web application that leverages Pexel API. And you have this conversation with the chat window here. And as you have this was the first conversation I had with it. And then I told it specifically what I wanted. I went in and I said, hey, I want to use these technologies, Next.js, ShadCN, Tailwind, the kind of technologies you want. And then I went in and I also said, hey, I want to store that data also locally. So I don't want to use any kind of database. And then when I was done, I asked it to write me a PRD. And so with that PRD was created, what I did was I ran this task here, or this command, where I said, go into this file, and within this file, I believe it comes with a PRD. If you go to the template, it comes with an example PRD. So I said, hey, take this PRD that I've created and use this example PRD that TaskMaster understands and create the PRD based on this. So when it creates that, it ends up creating this file. Where is it? Example task. Yeah, it ends up creating this file here, which in this case, it essentially says, I'm going to set up the repository, then I'm going to integrate it to the API, and then I'm going to have a responsive gallery grid, and then I'm going to implement it, and then I'm going to add search. And after search, I'm going to implement favorites. And after that, I'm going to implement an infinite scroll. So it breaks it all down based on that PRD that I've created. And essentially, I ran some other stuff to say, okay, now that I'm ready, you now start going in and saying, let's start with the first task. And you run that, and it starts to run the first task, and it will give you some information, ask you to run through it. So essentially, you start vibe coding it. But at one point, I asked it like to show me my task table. And this is what my task table looks like. As you're getting through it, it tells you, okay, I'm done with this. Now I'm doing the next one. These are the dependencies. And these are also the priorities in terms of like how hard or easy it is in some cases, and in implementing infinite scroll and all that stuff. One of the thing I did was I broke my tasks into different little task files so that it's easier to follow. So as you can see, I have task one, and task one has the details and then also has a bunch of stuff. Actually, I'm not deploying to Vercel. That was just something I added in there. Then the task two does something separate, and it breaks out the implementation details. And all of this is really coming from here. So essentially just taking all of this and rewriting it into smaller tasks so that you can always reference it back to know exactly what you do. Because as you keep building this, think of like you're building a really big app and you have 100 tasks. You're just going to run out of context window. So you want to be able to just reference and say, okay, now I'm in task 6. I want you to do this for task 6, and then you run through it. So this is also really good for if you already have a code base that's really huge and you don't necessarily need to do any of the other stuff, and you don't necessarily need it to understand the context, but you want to go in a specific context. So you run through that, you have something running, and I was able to essentially go in and generate a lot of this just by running the task. If you guys are interested in me walking through building something like this, I can also do that too. But I wanted to showcase this. This is what essentially came out of it, which is a wallpaper where you could search, I don't know, let's see, map, and it shows everything in there. It has infinity loops, and you can click on it to see more. You can share it if you want to, and you can download it as well. Downloads up here. You can see what your favorites are. You can remove things from favorite. You can add them to favorites, and you can view them bigger, and it tells you what the resolution is. So all of this was done in probably less than an hour, thanks to the TaskMaster. It actually really makes it very easy to build. The only requirements, you really have to have a PRD, and you have to look at it and break everything down into smaller pieces and then start running through it. So it's almost like you're writing real code. I did run into some things like some of the infinite scroll wasn't working well. So in some cases, I had to go into the code to fix it because it was just taking too much time to go back and forth. But the great thing about it is like you have tasks, and you could just say, rewind from this task and just take this task 5 all the way out. And I want to redo it and start from task 4 because maybe it screwed up on task 5. So you can easily do that instead of having to go into the code and trying to figure out what the AI did or whatever. You could just say, reverse all task 4 and let's start all over again. Yeah, that's it.